Today we'll be speaking with Kevin Walling. Kevin is a Democratic campaign strategist, a partner at HG Creative, and is a former 2020 Biden-Harris campaign surrogate. Kevin, it's great to have you on. Just to get right into the thick of it, right? You look at the polling, I look at the polling, we all look at the polling. Some portion of my audience writes to me and says, David, the polling makes it obvious that this thing is over. There's no way Joe Biden can win. He's losing every poll. Others say some version of, a lot of those polls don't yet account for the reality that a lot of the people that are saying they're going to vote third party aren't really going to vote third party. Trump's trials haven't started. Neither of them is officially the nominee. Fill in the blanks, right? Here's why we don't really need to worry. The second view, that there's no concern here, is not striking me as super compelling, although I still do think the most likely outcome here is Biden ultimately wins. It seems risky to me to just say the polling is obviously wrong, because the last few election cycles, the polling has more or less been right. So give us first, as an entryway to this conversation, what do you see when you look at these polls?
Yeah, David, it's a great question. Listen, we're 264 days out from the election. That's an eternity in politics. And as we saw from the special election results in New York 3, Tom Suozzi, a guy I've known for a long time, worked for in previous campaigns, outperformed those polls. It was a 2-3 point race. He won by 8 points. So there's a lot of variables at play to your point. And, we talk about third parties as a great example. And part of the equation with that is actually ballot access, right? So, you have Robert Kennedy Jr. out there campaigning. He's raising money. He's doing some events with some celebrities. But it's a real question as to the actual practicality of getting him on the ballot come November in a lot of these key states. It's very difficult to run as a third party, especially if he's not going to align with the Libertarian line or the Green Party line. So I don't put a lot of merit and trust in polls, especially this far out, given, to your point too, questions around Donald Trump's legal predicaments, questions around, the fate of the war in Israel and Hamas, questions just now that have arisen with Russia and their nuclear capabilities that just came up to the surface just this past week. So there's so many variables at play and nothing is a foregone conclusion.
One of the variables at play that you've engaged with, we've covered some of your clips on Fox discussing this, is this issue of the cognitive state of both Trump and Biden. I've been covering the apparent cognitive decline of Trump for a long time. I also can do nothing but concede that Joe Biden is not at his peak. And as I've said before, if they've both got dementia, I'm voting Biden because he's been an incredibly successful president and has good people around him. I'm not saying that that's what I believe, but if we just say these are both old demented guys, the choice is still very clear for me. But what I'm curious about from your perspective is, behind the scenes, is the right acknowledging that something is up with Trump, even if on the air they are not yet willing to talk about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's no question, and you just look at the speech that former President Trump gave in my home state of South Carolina last week, where he's doubling, or last night rather, where he's doubling down on the attacks on NATO. He's slurring words, he's mispronouncing individuals, he's mixing up world leaders, and that's been a trend that we've seen for a long time.
Yeah.
In recent in not just in this recent campaign. So, again, I think the American people, as the president has said, are going to judge both of these men. They're both, approaching, one's over 80, one's approaching 80. They could have been, as the as the White House has said, they could have been high school colleagues. So, I saw a meme the other day. You had Yoda and you had the Emperor from Star Wars, and they, the meme said, both are old, and threw up their hands. So your point, David, it's going to be it's going to be a choice election between these two individuals, and we'll see how that process plays out.
When it comes to the Biden side of it, what's the right way, in your view, for the left to handle it? Because I'm completely honest with my audience 100% of the time, and for years I've said, if you look at Biden's 2020 debates and his 2012 debate against Paul Ryan, there's a difference. What he did with Paul Ryan was so stunning and humiliating that it almost made you feel bad for Paul Ryan. And while Biden made his points in 2020, it's certainly a different Joe Biden. It's now been almost 4 more years. We can't bury our heads in the sand. And so, what's the right approach here while still maintaining the North Star that is, there's two very different choices here, and we know what the right choice is?
Yeah, David, it's a really good question. I think part of it is not denying the undisputable fact that Joe Biden is old. He's 81 years old. I think you saw him give a speech just the other day before an audience in Washington, where he talked about the fact that he's old, that he's been around the block, and to not acknowledge what people are seeing with their very eyes, I think is wrong. I think playing into the idea that yeah, he's old, but he's still delivering for the American people. I mean, this guy it's so funny. Politico had this article out, will Joe Biden get out of his cocoon? And I tweeted at them and it got some attention. This guy's been to 14 different states in the last 3 weeks. He is not shying away from the travel schedule and the intense pressures of the office. So I think playing into that, not acknowledging it is problematic, but playing into the idea that this guy has been around the block. He knows all these world leaders. He mixed up President Sisi of Egypt and the president of Mexico. Donald Trump doesn't even probably know the names of the two presidents, let alone where Mexico and Egypt are on a map. So again, I think that contrast message, while acknowledging the limitations of age, is important, but what that age is able to deliver for the American people, I think, is also important.
What do you make of the ideas of replacing Joe Biden? And there's a bunch of iterations of this. There are those who say he will be forced out by who I don't really know. It doesn't seem the DNC is going to do it, but someone will force him out. Jill won't let him run, or whatever the case may be. Biden himself will realize he can't do it and will exit. There's a bunch of iterations of this. And what I want you to address is not just the likelihood of this, but my view is that even if you said, if Biden wasn't president today and you said, David, who excites you on the Democratic side? Who would you pick? If Biden's not already president with dozens of major achievements, I don't choose Joe Biden. I certainly choose someone younger. There's no doubt. But understanding where we are today, it seems to me that a lot of the replace Biden people ignore the chaos element of a party saying to a guy that's already won every primary, including in states where he was just a write-in, right? Saying we're removing him on what basis, I don't know, and picking someone else. It actually seems like bad strategy to me as well.
Yeah. Listen, this is a guy, who spent 50 years in public life. He first ran for the presidency back in the 80s. So this is something that he's desired for a long time. He has it. He's working hard. He's delivering for the American people. So it's not something he's going to give up without a lot of thought into it. And again, I think the first lady are up for this reelection fight and are in it to win it. So to your point, it would be chaos. I think, depending on the calendar, the timing of it, if it happens before or after the convention, but I don't see that happening. This is a guy that I think was actually pretty candid the other day at a fundraiser where he said, I don't know necessarily if I would be running for re-election if Donald Trump wasn't the nominee on the other side. And He views a second Trump presidency, he's a religious guy. It's almost like a religious calling that he was called up with his experience, with his knowledge, with his affection for and from the American people to defeat this existential threat. And that's what Donald Trump poses in a second Trump term. And there's a lot of powers of incumbency of the presidency in our history, 250 plus years. It's very difficult to beat an incumbent president. And he did it by 8 million more votes last go round. So again, I think he views that through the lens of history, through the lens of Donald Trump being this existential crisis and candidate, and he being one of the sole people that can defeat him come November.
There's a slice of my audience and a slice of the left that's not happy with Joe Biden for his handling of what's going on in Israel and Gaza. And the gist of that displeasure usually is along the lines of he is enabling too much aggression and killing by the Israeli military. He's not being tough enough with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's looking the other way. The specifics of the criticism are less important for this conversation than the practical question of, is that something that could possibly affect Biden's reelection chances? My instinct, Kevin, has been no, because that is primarily an issue that the youngest element of the electorate is concerned with. That's the piece of the electorate that votes at the lowest rate. And also, I do think that at the end of the day, people are more going to be motivated to vote or not vote based on domestic issues, the economy, et cetera. That's just my completely, amateur assessment of it. What do you see on this?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's an animating issue for some certain segments of the population. Clearly, we've seen that resonate with young people, that the war with Hamas and Israel. But that might be a key factor in some states where you see not just young people outperforming their numbers, but also Arab American, Muslim American Democrats in some of these key states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, what have you. And it will be interesting to see where that stands again, nearly 250 days plus away from the election in terms of the state of the war in the Middle East. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be domestic issues. I think abortion is still going to be an overwhelming, important factor for a lot of people voting about this. We've seen that resonate in all these special elections, in some of these ballot initiatives that have gone forward, whether it be in Ohio, Kentucky, Kansas, what have you. And again, part of this issue too is, you've got, an issue that resonates with a lot of young people, but where's Donald Trump's stance on the war with Israel and Hamas? He's again doubling down on his calls for a Muslim ban, for example. And so he's farther out of the mainstream than I would contend that President Biden is in his support for the people of Israel and somewhat tacit support of Benjamin Netanyahu. So we'll see again how that process plays out.
Yeah, and people will sometimes call me and they'll say, David, I'm on the left. I voted Biden in 2020, but I just can't vote for him because of what he is doing in Gaza. And whether he's doing it or not, it doesn't matter. If that's the perception, okay, people are entitled to vote however they want. When I ask them, but hold on a second, Trump basically doesn't care if you bulldoze all of Gaza and kill everyone. Why would you then do that? And they say, well, no, it would probably just motivate me to stay home and not vote for anybody, or maybe vote third party. I believe some of them will do that. But when it really gets to October and the possibility of 4 more years of Trump becomes a real possible outcome, my hope is most of them will realize this is not a good reason to make this, to vote in this way.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And again, you look at some of the indicators right now, again, 250 plus days out, there's a good segment of the population that don't realize that it's going to be a Trump-Biden rematch once again, that were doubting that Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee again in 2024. So as more people realize that that is the dynamic at play and that this really is a binary choice for the American people, I think to your point, they're going to come home to Joe Biden.
We've been speaking with Democratic campaign strategist Kevin Walling, who's a partner at HG Creative and also a former 2020 Biden-Harris campaign surrogate. Kevin, really appreciate your time and insights today.
David, thanks for having me.